Hello everybody, it's your favorite West Virginia Space here and the Scp Foundation. One of the most popular collaborative writing projects / universes in all of the internet right now, and it truly deserves its place. It has tons of cool lore and characters and tons of fun things to play with. However, this is, now granted, one of the most common things to do is, could character X beat character Y? This is common in every fictional universe, including the Scp Foundation, especially outside of it. Who could beat characters like the hard-to-kill reptile, or particularly common. However, there is a problem, and this is partially stemming from the fact that SCP fans are the second most annoying group of fans out there. About my universe can always beat yours, second only to Warhammer 40k fans. However, I want to talk a specific reason of why the SCP Foundation isn't actually as strong as you think. Or at the very least, it's not just going to instantly contain any fictional character you put it up against. Let's begin. A quick disclaimer before we begin here. First thing, I am specifically talking about the SCP Foundation itself, not its entire universe. This is one of the most annoying things I see when trying to look up these kind of conversations, because they always have somebody saying, oh, well, the Scarlet King, or oh, well, this, or oh, this Pattern Screamer. It's like, listen, when we're asking the question of, could the Foundation beat somebody, that doesn't mean every single entity in its universe, just what the Foundation can use. It's like if I asked, what could Marvel's S.H.I.E.L.D. beat, and then you start pulling up characters like Galactus, who legitimately never worked for them. So that's the first disclaimer. And the second one, and far more important, is the SCP universe doesn't have a strict canon. So I must say this with a complete and utter honesty. Pretty much any character with any kind of abilities could either completely demolish the Foundation or never be caught, or they could be instantly captured like there's no tomorrow, because the power of the Foundation varies so heavily. So when I say this as a honest thing, I'm trying to speak of what I would consider the average power of the Foundation. This is just kind of an important analogy, but I must say this is not like a definitive who could beat X, because that's just not possible with the SCP Foundation, as there's no real base canon to work with. I'm just discussing averages and what I normally see at that Foundation, so any kind of comments I make later about how the SCP Foundation couldn't do this or could capture these guys is based on mostly my standard interpretation of the Foundation. So please don't go citing random stories where they are infinitely more powerful, because I'm just trying to speak on what I think they're supposed to be as an average. I'm not saying the stories aren't canon or don't exist, they're perfectly fine. It's just a understanding on that, okay? We good? Good. The first discussion I want to get into is actually a very specific one, is that fundamentally, how big is the Foundation? Now, this is a very tricky question to ask, because due to the nature of it being a secret organization, it's not exactly give statistics, but this is somewhat interesting to consider here. As generally speaking, the SCP Foundation, depending on how many people it has at disposal, could, in theory, just swarm any target you throw at them with sheer Zerg numbers. However, this is a bit tricky, as one, and quite simply, we just don't know how big the Foundation is supposed to be. So if they had to take on, say, the Avengers, yes, if you had enough bodies to bury them, you could eventually win, but can they statistically lose that many people and get away with it? This, of course, is a very hard question to pin down, but this actually does manifest into another issue, meaning that even if because no matter how big or small you want the Foundation to be, they run into a simple issue. If they have to deal with a new threat, once again, let's say the Avengers pop in and they want to contain them, they're going to run into a simple issue of the Foundation can't throw everything at a target, because it has to contain other things. I mean, this is more of a logistical thing, but like, the Foundation doesn't have every single person just there twiddling their thumbs for something to happen. Most, if not all of its resources are dedicated to containing what they already have, or studying it. Yes, they have strike teams and a few free researchers that could, in the most cans at least, deal with a new problem that would show up, but it's not like they could just throw every single operative they have at a problem, because they're dealing with other things that have to be contained, other SCPs that already exist. So no matter how big you make the Foundation, it can't throw its full might at any target, just logistically. This is like saying, Rome could destroy any individual barbarian tribe. That's probably true, but it couldn't focus its full might at a target. This is something that people tend to forget, as, yes, even if the Foundation has huge numbers, it just can't throw everyone it has at a single problem. But if it could win a lot of fights, to be honest. Another more slightly hard to describe thing here, or at least the knowledge, is the idea of the SCP Foundation using the SCPs it has locked up to win a fight. And this is kind of fair because it will occasionally use SCPs for its own ends. This is somewhat within their character, and I'm not denying that. However, people tend to make some false allegations, or at least seem to miss certain aspects. One is that the Foundation is containing these entities, and though some are non-sentient or otherwise don't really acknowledge their own imprisonment, it's hard, just as an example, say like the cone that makes you question everything, doesn't exactly have a sentience to try to escape. However, the ones that don't want to be contained would be extremely difficult to weaponize in this fashion, because why wouldn't they just take the time to escape during the fight? I know there's a bit of a cheesy question because power scaling fights don't actually usually question of why these people are fighting, just let's get there and have them fight, but this is an actual thing the Foundation would have to consider themselves. How many of the SCPs they can let out for a fight would actually help them, or just go rogue immediately the second they could, or even worse yet, team up with the attackers. Like if you're a sentient, like a person who just has some anomalous ability, and you've been captured, imprisoned, probably tortured and experimented on by the Foundation, why would you side with them when you could join up with the people right in front of you, like the Justice League or the Avengers, who promise you nice, happy life if you just don't fight them or help them win? Most people, if you took most people away from their homes and families and then torture them for who knows how long, and they aren't completely broken, would take the first opportunity to get back at their attacker. And you just gave them a pretty good one. And fun fact, a lot of the SCPs that have any kind of, free will or sentience don't generally like being contained for the most part. So they would probably take any opportunity they could. And granted, there are ways you can make this make sense, but it's not as simple as SCP Foundation, I choose you, Shy Guy, go beat up Superman. It's just not that simple. My last main point for today is a bit of a slightly weirder one, but I think it's worth considering. Is it the nature of the SCP universe? Now, while some SCPs are free or on the loose or whatever, the vast majority of them are contained. That is the premise of the setting, is there is a Foundation that is containing these dangerous objects, or entities, or whatever. Now, this is, of course, all fine and dandy, but it does lead to a writing thing. Fundamentally, these things are supposed to be contained from a writing perspective. The Plague Doctor is supposed to be in his containment, for example. That is the default assumption, which means in the universe, when being written, these entities have to be contained. So even though a lot of them have some pretty powerful hacks and abilities they can use, they're also designed to have weaknesses on some level that let them be contained. Now, this might sound a bit weird, but it's worth mentioning. All of them have this trait. If you throw the SCP Foundation against an entity or a being that doesn't come from the SCP Foundation, it doesn't necessarily have an easy or decent way to contain it, at least how the story is written. For example, the Avengers aren't written with an easy way to contain them, or at least way. I mean, granted, there are some ways they could do it, but they aren't written with this press this to disable button, because that's not the premise of their stories. So the SCP Foundation is generally written that they have contained an entity, not that they had to struggle with it in the same way, if that makes sense. So this means that they don't just have, a lot of people say, oh, the SCP Foundation will know everything's weakness or some secret way to contain something, when it just doesn't. Like, unless they have some kryptonite or some magic on hand, Superman's gonna be a pretty hard challenge. Someone like Iron Man, the Hulk, or Thor could be a nightmare. And then there's other beings across, fiction that they just would struggle to contain. They can't, the SCP Foundation doesn't generally have the magical ability to just say, I contain you, because that's just not how their universe works. They live in a universe where, because how the stories are written, every entity has generally a way to contain them. This is not something that other fictional universes share, so the Foundation can't just contain something because it's the Foundation. It lives in a world where everything is written to be contained by the Foundation. A bit of a wrap up at the end here for today. One, I was not specifically talking about individual entities today, as that's a whole different discussion that we could have a different time. And B, I am specifically talking about the Foundation and its capabilities, not the Global Occult Coalition or the Serpent's Hand or anyone else. This is mostly because the Foundation is the most popular one, but it's also the most consistent in a way, as trying to determine the abilities and overall power of the other factions is just a nightmare. They don't have the consistent traits the Foundation does, and they vary wildly, meaning that it's really hard to get an opinion piece out of could the Global Occult Coalition win a fight against S.H.I.E.L.D., because that's just way harder to do. But ultimately, that was just a small addendum for this video. Ultimately, I hope you enjoyed it. I wasn't trying to be super harsh, and yes, I do think the Foundation is quite a threat in a lot of universes. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of misconceptions and other such things that kind of pop up in these discussions that I just think need to be addressed before you can start talking logistics, because it just doesn't work, or at least these common mistakes or rumors or whatever just overall hurt the discussion. This isn't me to shut down and say the Foundation can't win anything. It's just mean don't use things that don't make sense. But ultimately, like I said, the Foundation's a mess, and it's all fiction, and it's all fun, and ultimately, I'm not trying to shoot anyone's fun down here. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, please comment down below. If you want to have my actual opinions of could this entity or this entity win this fight against who, feel free to ask down below, and I'll see you all next time. Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.